Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. We got a lot to talk about today. In fact, I'm going to engage with you, my listeners, my viewers here. I want you to engage with me back. I want you to chime in. We're going to talk about Michigan's legislature. This is a very Michigan centric program today because Michigan's legislature is busy, 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 very busy this week. And it's hard to overlook how their priorities of those in power, one particular party, is going to impact our lives because they want to get some very niche programs through, regardless if you like them or not, the voters out there. So you got early prisoner releases, you got some controversial bills about driver's licenses for illegal immigrants, free housing for the middle class. Why is that something that we need to waste our, billions of what we had? It was a surplus of money just to give it out for people so they can buy a house for them. There's a lot to unpack today, so we're going to dive into the agenda and examine some of the consequences here. So I would really love it if you can chime in. We're going to get into that in just a few seconds, but remember, comment. You can ask me questions. You can respond multiple times. It's going to be a conversation between you and me. So if you're watching on Facebook, you're watching on X, you're watching on YouTube, or listening somehow, go into the comments section and chime in. Ask questions. They could be, moderately concise. They could be a little lengthy, but stick to the point, and then you can chime in again if you would like. Also, just a reminder, the best way you can help Tom Jordan Live, simply subscribe to our podcast, click the notification bell, share the content. If it's something you find meaningful to you, share it with friends and neighbors and enemies alike. All right. Appreciate it so much. Thanks for that. It does mean a lot to us. Thank you. All right. Let's look at Lansing's agenda items this week. There is the beautiful state capitol and beautiful downtown Lansing, Michigan. And the legislative priorities reflect that a mix of very, very controversial and fiscally impactful. When I say fiscally impactful, I mean it's going to hurt the economy. And you're going to necessarily have to increase what you pay the government in order to enact these things through. And they're doing it through increased taxes and increased fees for just about everything you do. And these are very socially charged proposals as well. Boy, it's a lame duck session. They're trying to ram this down our throats this week. All right, so let's talk about some of these controversial proposals. There's House Bill 4156. And before I get into this, it's a reminder here, please contact your representatives. Find out who they are. Contact them, because if enough people call them and write them and flood them, they probably will either not, if they're a Democrat, they might not show up to cast their vote. And if they don't, it's a very slim margin, right, of majority. These will not go through because these are not popular with most Michiganders or Michiganians, or I'm Michiganish. So whatever you call yourself, that's not popular most likely with you, what they're trying to get through. Especially, okay, this one here, it boggles my mind why anybody would support this, the National Popular Vote Compact. What they're trying to do here is to align all of Michigan's electoral votes with the national popular vote, regardless of how we vote in the state. So the critics of this, they're arguing that, listen, this completely dilutes Michigan's influence in presidential elections. It absolutely does. I mean, why let, the coastal elites decide Michigan's future? California, New York, Massachusetts. That's who will be deciding how this state, which has no relevance to the state, but they will decide now who gets to be elected president. And so that's got to be done away with. It just basically takes the vote of whoever wins the popular vote. It sidesteps all the voters in Michigan and requires that now Michigan votes for whoever won the popular vote, regardless of how the majority in the state voted. It's insane that they would do this. And we'll get into that a little bit. There's another one here as well. There's the driver's licenses for illegal immigrants. House Bill 4410, they want this to go through, the Democrats do. Because why? They want to legalize them. Eventually, they would like for them to vote, eventually. And maybe a driver's license would help them do that. So it could allow illegal immigrants access to driver's licenses. It will. They're already getting them. And it raises a lot of security and fairness concerns as well. Rewarding illegal behavior with legal documentation. What's next on this? All right. So House Bill 4431, legalizing sodomy. Why is this on the? Why is this in there? It's a repeal of what they say is outdated laws, but the social and the moral implications could spark a lot of controversy. So legalizing sodomy in the state of Michigan. All right, that's a priority for the Democrats. House Bill 4556, a release for 20-year offenders, violent offenders, criminals, murderers, rapists, those kinds. It extends the early release debate to long-term prisoners. So if you're serving a life sentence for something you did that was horrific, like murder, you might not have to do that anymore based on this. If you get enough bonus points with how you were acting in prison based on some, I don't know, standard that they make up. There's doubling malpractice insurance. There's doubling malpractice insurance. All right, the cost, significant cost increases for medical professionals, doctors. It could worsen absolutely doctor shortages. And I, in my view of this, is that what they're trying to do is to eradicate private health care in the state. Because if you make it too, cost ineffective for a doctor to practice, they're going to shut down, and they're getting closer and closer. People think, doctors in these practices make so much money. They used to make a lot more money. Now it's very, very difficult to thrive as a physician, a family doctor in a private practice, because the fees and the costs just keep going up and up and up, and they do want to do away with it. So why? They can have government-funded health care for everybody, the same for every single individual. So there's also Senate Bill 4907. This is the Hollywood film credits. It reinstates the tax credits for Hollywood productions, and this is another example of corporate welfare. We're talking like $2 billion in these credits to allow people to shoot movies and commercials and all that in the state of Michigan. And does it ever come back to benefit? What's the return on investment? It's pretty marginal. It's not much. And then why do they want to do this? They want to double the marriage license fees. So if you want to get married and you want the state to approve your marriage, you're going to have to pay twice what you did last year if you want to get married. And what does that do? Well, it burdens families. And what does it do? It funds all of these unnecessary state programs that we've been talking about for the past couple of years. They say, hey, we're going to provide, free child care. We're going to provide free, nursery school. We're going to provide all these, free tuition. Well, it's not free because you're going to just have to pay more for any type of service you're supposed to get from the government. Mandatory services, by the way, including a mandatory state park pass. You will be automatically required to pay for a state park pass on your license. You know how you get that? Even if you never use the parks, like you don't want it. Right now you have the option, you can opt into it. Well, this will require you to opt out of it instead. So if you want to go hiking, you can pay for that if you want. If you don't want to go hiking, you still have to pay for it. You understand me? That's the Democrats. That's their language here. Do what we tell you to do. Even if you don't want it, or we'll never use it. It's not necessary. There's House Bill 5988, free water for cities, free water. And you think, okay, well, that makes sense. We all need water, so we should get water for free. But the problem is we're not talking about going down to the river and getting the cup and drinking it. We're talking about a service that we pay for, which is incredibly expensive, to filter the water, to cleanse the water, to get the water, bring it to you. You're basically saying, we want you to do all of that for free. And again, it's not free. You're still paying for it, but you're paying for it with other fees and higher taxes instead of just paying for your water like we've always done here. If you want city water rather than your own well, you have to pay for that. It is a service. It is not a human right. You can dig your own well and get your own water that way. Well, you can't really if you're part of a city system, but they won't let you do that. But if if you don't have that, you can do it. But if you have a city system, you had to pay for it. I mean, that's the deal. That's the deal you made when you bought your house, kind of situation. So it raised a lot of questions about, the infrastructure funding, the fairness. What about rural areas that don't get free water? It's just for cities. It's another effort, in my view, to consolidate the citizens and move them out of the rural locations and condense everybody into these city municipalities so they can have better control over you. That is kind of what, if you want to talk about Marxism and that kind of thing, that is one of the efforts. They try to put everyone together so you can control them better. So maybe that's another attraction to get you to live in the city. And then there's free middle class housing. It's subsidized housing for the middle class. Why? Why is that? Why do we have to give people who earn the middle income earners in this state a house for free, or maybe it's an apartment, whatever it is? But why can't they pay for their own? I mean, that's the American way, right? You earn a living and you buy your house, or you maybe pay your rent. In the middle class. So what will that do necessarily? It'll increase taxes for everybody on working families. Yeah, we're going to give you a house, but you're going to pay a lot more in taxes. You're not going to pay for the house, but you're going to pay us instead. That's the whole. It's not free. It never has been. It is on your dime. And then there's something else. I don't know how I feel about this one, banning vape flavors. Some people see that as a regulatory overreach that may push vaping underground. I don't know. I'm not a fan of vaping and the flavored vaping. I guess there is an argument to be made that it's attractive to kids, and it is, So we're going to get more and more into this today. Let's take some comments here, and then I'll get back to some of my thoughts on these. Let's bring them up one by one. Jim Chikowski, Tom, are there any level-headed Democrats in Lansing that would vote against these policies? Surprisingly, Jim, I do think there are some level-headed Democrats who do not support these policies, but I don't think they would vote against them because they are threatened with being censured if they go against the Democratic Party. Their careers are threatened. Their political livelihoods are at stake. You want to run for this office again? Then you're gonna walk in step with the rest of your party, or else. That is what they do. So I think that maybe if you're bold and brave enough, you can speak out. And I think it was Karen Witt said, she's one of my favorite Democrats in Lansing because she has stood against her party. She has spoken out against these very, very controversial proposals in the past. And because she did, and a lot of Democrats, for example, she came on my program at one time and talked about the whole abortion. She was supporting, abortion. She's not pro-life by any stretch, but she does support, a healthy clinic for these women to go into and have a surgical procedure done on them. And the Democrats in Lansing got away with any requirements, any standard of care requirements, any sanitary requirements, any cleanliness, any consent requirement, informed consent, or a waiting period of 24 hours, so we can meet with a doctor or a healthcare practitioner to explain the process to you and some of the risks. Michigan wants to get rid of all of that, and she's like, well, wait a second, I care about the women going in to get an abortion. Why shouldn't we? Why don't you care about them either? So she stood up against that, and she was heavily criticized at the very least. But she's been reprimanded in the past for standing against people in her own party with these ridiculous, far left, undemocratic proposals and bills that are moving through the state legislature at a rapid pace because time is of the essence. They know they only have but a short time before the window closes by Christmas. So that's what they're doing right now. Crazy stuff. Thanks for that, Jim. Appreciate it. Let's bring up another comment here. It's Annie. Free housing for the middle class will only increase taxes and create a dependent group out of those who are independent right now. Fairly insidious. A very good comment, Annie. Thank you again for your comments here. It's true. What's the point of it? It is insidious. There is an ulterior motive here. When somebody tells you, I'm going to give you something for free, there's always at least one string attached, and likely there's many strings attached to where you become controlled by all these strings, and you end up being a puppet because you have no freedom, you have no independence, as Annie just so eloquently explained there. You are no longer free. You've been bought, and now you're, in a sense, a theoretical slave because you can't do what you want to do. It's not your house. And you've heard the phrase, you will, what is it? You won't own anything and you will be happy, or something like that. That's the World Economic Forum. That's what they're doing here. You're not going to own the house. They don't want you to have property rights. This has been the progressive movement for decades. No rights for citizens. They pretend this propaganda. This is again what the early progressives in this country put out a lot of propaganda. They had a propaganda department in these various presidencies and executive branches and members of Congress to put out the idea that this is going to set you free. But in reality, they're enslaving you, making you less independent. And this is just one of those examples. You're never going to own that property. You're never going to own that house, and you will be enslaved in a sense because they don't want, progressives do not believe in property rights. They don't believe in independent civil liberties. They say they do, but they don't. And that is why, and we had a long conversation in yesterday's program about the administrative state. That is the reason behind the administrative state, is to tell you how you are to live, what you can and cannot do. And that enslaves you. That gives you all these strings on you. If you want to cut the strings, yeah, it's going to take work in your life. It's productivity from yourself, dependence upon your God to help you through these things. But they don't want that. They want you to be dependent upon your government. That's what's behind all of this stuff. It's a ruse, and it's meant to keep them in power and you out of power. Remember, we are to govern. We're a self-governing society, and that's slowly being eroded. Let's bring up one more here. One more comment here. It is Orlando Hodges. Hey, Orlando, welcome back. Is there any Michigan website that lists how the state reps and state senators vote on these bills as well, so we can monitor their activities? Well, I think you can just go, I have it offhand here, but Orlando, is a great question. We should be monitoring them. I don't know if MIRS has that kind of information, but there's, you can go through the official channels, the government channels, and decipher who voted for what and all that. But it is a bit tedious. So that's a good question. I'll look into that, Orlando, and I'll get back to you. Thanks for that. Appreciate it. All right, let's move on here. We wanted to bring in. Here's the thing, some members of the state legislature this morning, but they're pretty much all booked up right now because they are meeting this morning. I think the House Freedom Caucus is meeting at 9 to 10 this morning. And, so you got representatives there in the House. You got the senators who are all, from a conservative side, trying to stop these things from going through. So right now, this moment in Lansing, they are meeting, trying to strategize to prevent these from going through because they hurt you. They hurt Michigan citizens. There are more than 180 of these bills this week. I think it's 181 to be exact. And it seems to me that most, if not all of these, are extreme and very far-fetched. And I wonder, how they actually benefit citizens in the state of Michigan. And we heard from Matt Maddock, he's a representative. He's not going to vote for a single one of these because he says they hurt there isn't one that helps the citizens. It's all about keeping the Democrats in power. Annie was right. This is insidious what they're doing. What's the end game here? Why put all these things through when only a very small sliver of the population might benefit from this and they gain an advantage over everybody else? Is Lansing prioritizing policies that help Michigan families? Or are they catering to these niche agendas and these activist priorities and, of course, to their own state of power? And there's a lot of voter fatigue in this, too. Remember, they're doing this after there was a clear mandate, not just across the country, but also right here specifically in the state of Michigan, that Michigan voters are very concerned at this far left trajectory that the state has gone with and how incredibly, different they are from the old, if you look at the JFK days of the Democratic Party, I didn't agree with a lot of it back then, but it was much better than it is now, and it's not the same party whatsoever. All right, so let's talk about some of these things here. So Michigan, the Senate Democrats, they're proposing this week to allow what they call productivity credits in these prisons. So they want to shorten prison sentences for violent offenders who complete some programs like vocational training. So you learn how to be a plumber. Hey, you're going to be a plumber now. Well, get out of here and just don't try to kill someone this time, okay, buddy? That kind of a mindset, I think. How does that plan ensure that justice is served? And what about the victims who, family members who've been victimized or killed or raped by these individuals? How are they going to feel when these offenders leave prison early? It's justice. When you think about it, it is fundamentally about accountability. It is about paying the price for what an offender has committed. It's not about if that person can get a job when he or she is released from prison. It's about accountability. There is a rehabilitation component to it, of course, but that doesn't mean just because you've been rehabilitated or you're able to work now that suddenly you should be let out of prison. And these programs that they're proposing here might prepare these inmates for reentry into society, but shortening the sentences, it undermines the deterrent effect of prison. I mean, in one sense, it becomes kind of like a college. Hey, I'm going to go to prison so I can learn how to make money, becoming whatever, an apprentice doing this or that, or learning some skill that when you get out, you're going to make have a nice career. So what prison is for? I hate to say it. I do believe in rehab, but just because you learn a skill doesn't mean you're ready to go out into society. I think it's the benefits for the prisoners over public safety here. And the victims in this, they deserve assurance that sentences mean what they say, not this arbitrary points system that erodes trust in the legal process. All right, so that's that. That's what's going through this week. The National Popular Vote Compact. All right, this has been passed in many different states around the country. And when I first interviewed somebody, it happened to be a Republican I was interviewing regarding this National Popular Vote Compact. And essentially what it is, if you get enough states to agree to do this, that all of their votes in that state will just be given to whoever wins the national popular vote, not at all based on how the people in the state voted, but whoever won the national popular, if you give all the votes to them, if you get enough states to agree to that, that amends the U.S. Constitution to now allowing this be the way that your president is chosen. That it necessarily means and effectively means that your vote no longer counts. It means nothing. It's your vote, your individual right to cast the ballot is out the window. It doesn't matter anymore. It all depends on the majority around the country, and whatever the majority says, that's who you voted for as well. All right, so this last time, let's say in 2016. Okay, so Donald Trump, that's a good example. Donald Trump won the electoral vote, but he lost the popular vote. Hillary Clinton lost the popular vote. Donald Trump won the state of Michigan in 2016. What that would have effectively meant is that Donald Trump, all the people in the state of Michigan who voted for Donald Trump and he won the state of Michigan, he now would have effectively lost the state of Michigan. And all of those electoral votes, instead of going to Donald Trump, would have gone to Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton would have been your president in 2017 through 2021. That's what this is meant to do. It strips away a state's right. It's the United States of America. Each state has a right to pick who that state believes would be the best candidate for president. The state picks, and then it goes to the federal. The results go to the federal government. And that's how it's decided. It's always been that way because it would be unfair if it didn't. It would not be a constitutional republic. And this is the attempt, again, these progressives in power here. So it would be horrible if this goes through. It would actually effectively kill your voice, the national popular vote. It's handing power to populous states. The most popular in most of these states are blue states. Texas not being one of them. They're red still, but California, Massachusetts, New York, Illinois, you go down the list here, and these very populous liberal states now would have power over, and they would probably hold on to that power for decades, maybe centuries to come. It does not protect Michigan's voice at all. It doesn't. In fact, the plan strips Michigan of its ability to weigh in as a unique state with specific needs, specific interests. Instead of being one of 50 meaningful voices, Michigan would be drowned out by the largest states and eroding the very principle of federalism that protects regional diversity in governance. So federalism, it sounds like, it means authoritarianism. No, it's the opposite. Federalism That means that the whole point of the federal government is to protect the individual people within the states so that everybody has their rights protected, every individual. And so that's the importance, essentially, in a nutshell, the importance of federalism. All right, so this House Bill 4410, it aims to provide driver's license to illegal immigrants, allowing illegal immigrants access to, legal identification. They are legally now allowed to be here because they have a legal ID in the state. So what does this mean for us? Providing the government-issued IDs to individuals who have violated immigration laws to come over into this country, first and foremost, it undermines the rule of law. And it creates all these loopholes for misuse in what? In elections. All people look at is an ID, and you don't have to have an ID any longer in the state. But if you have it, you're good to go. There's no questions asked. If you don't have an ID in Michigan during an election, then they'll just ask you to sign a piece of paper, and then you're good to go. But the ID skirts even that little minor step, and you're considered a legitimate voter in this country. Remember, you have to be a U.S. citizen. You can't be an illegal immigrant to vote. And this is absolute. I mean, what other reason can you think of? Chime in, let me know that why would you be fully supportive of an illegal immigrant getting a driver's license in the state when they're here illegally? They're criminals. Why are you supportive of that? And if you are, let me know. I'd like to hear from you. It gives them access to benefit programs. Maybe you support that. It gives them all sorts of things. Maybe a universal basic income that's down the road. It's a dangerous precedent we're setting. It's a dangerous message that illegal behavior leads to legal privileges in the state. So that's what's going through this week too. Okay, so then there's this Senate Bill 6085. It will double doctors' malpractice insurance for doctors in the state of Michigan. You're thinking, I don't care. Doctors make a boatload of money. You have no idea how expensive malpractice insurance is right now and how many lawsuits these physicians face and how some of them are just barely struggling to their practices. You think the profit margins are high? They're pretty low. That's why they have to see like 100,000 patients a day. I'm exaggerating. But that's why they come in, they look at you. They don't even look at you. They just look at their computer. Well, how do you feel? I'm sorry, bye. And they leave. They go on to the next patients because they have to get volume in their offices in order for them to eke out a living. That's what our system has done to these physicians. Rather than getting good health care, which they always promise, they want government health care, which is horrific. You're like, what do you call it when you, I don't know. I forget the analogy, so I won't even say it. But anyway, it doesn't address the real healthcare issues. In fact, it exacerbates it. It makes it worse because the higher insurance costs mean fewer doctors can afford to practice in Michigan, especially in the underserved rural areas. And instead of supporting medical professionals, the bill would cripple the system, reducing access to care for families who need it the most. And I personally believe that's the point of this, to eradicate the private healthcare system so the government can fully take over. All right, then there's the Hollywood film credits. Now, I used to be kind of sympathetic to this because I know a guy who is starting off a company because based on the notion that if you start a film company here, you can get some subsidies to help you thrive and succeed, and it was pulled away, and that film company collapsed, and it was kind of heartbreaking to watch. But then I thought more about this. I'm like, okay, Hollywood film credits, basically tax credits, and it's like $2 billion, I believe, for the Michigan film industry. And the whole idea behind it, that taxpayers are going to give $2 billion to the film industry in Michigan, if this goes through, is that somehow the return on investment means a lot of really good paying jobs, and the tax revenue for the state is going to go through the roof, and it's not what's going to happen. Taxpayers are going to fund this. The film companies are going to make a boatload of money. They'll provide some temporary jobs during production of the film, and then they all take off. They leave to go do something else. And past experiences have shown that to be the case. Film credits showed minimal return on investment and the temporary job creation that vanished when productions moved to the next subsidized state. Think of Georgia. Think of they don't care. They'll go anywhere to shoot a movie. You can make any place look like any other place as well. So it's it does benefit the film industry, And the millionaires and billionaires who they say they don't support, but they do. I'm talking about the progressive left because it gives them a leg up, makes them good money. Maybe you can be a Debbie Stabenow and suddenly you're in the film Batman, that was shot here in, I think it was Batman and Superman that was filmed here in Detroit, and you get a little cameo appearance because you voted to allow this through. Listen, if Michigan wants economic growth, how do you do that? Foster local businesses that create lasting opportunities, jobs that last, not a little fly-by-night film company that's going to make a commercial tomorrow and be gone by Friday. Okay, there's that. House Bill 4547 would double marriage license fees under the guise of funding state programs. All right, so why is the state penalizing families who want to start their lives together instead of finding alternate ways to manage its budget? Well, doubling fees. I don't really, it's my opinion, maybe you feel the same way. I'm not all that convinced that the progressive wing of the Democrat Party is all that too concerned about marriages and family values. I've just, a sense I've had over the few years just kind of paying attention to this. You might feel differently. Let me know in the comments. Anyway, that was kind of an aside. Don't tell anybody. But anyway, doubling the fees here is an unnecessary burden on families. Especially these young couples who are already, grappling with the rising costs of eggs and the rising cost of living, instead of raising revenues on the back of everyday Michiganders, lawmakers could focus on, cutting all this wasteful spending out there and managing the existing funds responsibly. But no, they don't want to do that. We like to spend this $9 billion in surplus revenue on things that we think will get us reelected. All right, Senate Bill 5428. That's something that mandates that residents must buy state park passes. You're going to buy the park pass even if you don't use it, whether you like it or not, is what they're saying. And how is it forcing people to pay for a service they may not need or use? How is that fair? Or how is that effective? It's not, obviously. It's just another example of the government inserting itself into people's wallets for programs that could be better funded through, voluntary contributions or these targeted fees or the tax revenue that's already coming in the state, right? Why aren't those already large revenues that come to the state? Why don't they just use those and call it a day? We're already paying a lot of taxes. If you mandate these purchases, well, what happens to personal choice? I don't want to go to that park. I got a state park I got to go to now, and then I got a metro park I got to go to now, and I got a, maybe it's going to be a national park you got to pay for, and, not to mention the homeowners association fees to build a park for your kids' slide and swing set down the street. It doesn't end. We don't need all this. And it's government overreach. All right, free water for cities. What do you think of this? House Bill 5988. Right, you give free water if you live in the city, but if you live in a rural area, you will be excluded from the free water because you live in the wrong place. So how does this plan? How does that justify, favoring urban areas while neglecting the needs of rural communities that also struggle with water infrastructure? Why is that a good idea? It's not. The rural areas in the state, they face a whole lot of challenges with the aging infrastructure there as well, and their limited resources, and they're prioritizing cities for free water. I mean, why free water in the cities? Isn't that where all the jobs are supposed to be, in the city? If you're saying it's your fault, Mr. Rural Area person, that you decided to live out where there isn't the infrastructure that's needed, well, not really, because even based on that argument, you're saying that all the access to opportunities in the city. Well, then if that's the case, why do you need free water? It doesn't make sense. It's a circular argument. But then you say, well, because in urban areas there's a lot of poverty. Well, why is there a lot of poverty in the urban areas where you say there's a lot of opportunity and we should move to? Why should we move to an area where there's quite a bit of poverty? How are you going to meet the increased demand if everybody meets there? So it's just ignorance is what it is. There's something else afoot here. And this disparity just grows even more. It creates a greater disparity that unfairly pits one community against another. That is the Marxist way, by the way. And then the taxpayer funding for housing for the middle class. That's Senate Bill 293. And remember, please call your representatives and your senators. Tell them this is ridiculous. If you vote for this, I will vote for you out of office. A group that typically doesn't qualify for these subsidies would be the middle class. How does that policy address the root causes of housing affordability without exacerbating government dependency? Well, that's the reason why they're doing this. Is, as I said earlier, they want you to become more dependent on the government, not your God, not your own family. You remember the whole book written by Hillary Clinton, It Takes a Village. What she meant by that, it sounds nice. The village of your own community and your own locality, your own family, maybe your neighbors, families getting together with favors, other neighbors and helping each other out. That's not what she meant by that. What she meant by the village is the government. The government needs to come in and act as the tribal chief, telling you how to live and what to do. And we'll dole out all your health care, we'll dole out your food, we'll dole out your education and your housing now. You're not going to own any of it. We'll direct the entirety of it for you. But that's what we mean by village. It takes a village, means it takes the government. And it doesn't address any of the root causes of it all that the middle class is facing, the rising cost of living, and the housing challenges that do exist, by the way. The housing challenges stem from the rising costs that are driven by overregulation, market interference, and overspending. Government overspending. That's what's increasing the cost of living. So if you subsidize housing, that increases spending even more, which increases the cost of living. It's called inflation. And then it shifts the burden on the taxpayers, so they have to pay more in taxes, and it never tackles the policies that made housing unaffordable in the first place. So that is what's happening in the beautiful state of Michigan. That we can go through all of this. I can talk about this for another 2 hours, but I won't because that would be incredibly boring for you. And I think you get the point here. Let's bring us some comments here. And I appreciate your time. Carol F. Nice to hear from you, Carol. So a convict can study to be a tradesman in jail on the taxpayer's dime to become something many on the outside would love to have the opportunity to become free of charge. Yes. You nailed it, Carol. That's why this is such a problem, is that it's essentially like it's turning into a trade school. You go into jail or to a prison, spend it, it's going to be longer than your typical, maybe not actually, but typically if you're a murderer, might be longer than your typical 4-year stint in college, but it'll be less than life in prison, which was promised to the victims of the murder or of the rape or whatever the extended sentence was, has now been cut dramatically short because the person learned how to plumb or to become an iron worker. And I'm all for that. Again, I'll say this. I think it's important. Listen, it's important, I think, to go into jails. I have friends that have what they call a jail ministry, and they go into jails and they reach out to these prisoners who are in there who did wrong and are suffering for it, but showing them the right way. So eventually, when they do finish their sentence, that they will turn. There won't be this recidivism rate that is so exponential right now. When you let people out right away, they commit the crimes again. And I don't know if teaching them how to plumb is going to fix it. I think there needs to be something done with their heart, and that's what my friends do. They go in this prison. They share the Lord with them, God and biblical principles and how to really change be transformed by the power of Christ. And then you're seeing people actually be transformed as a result of that. I think it's much different than learning a trade. I think trades are good, and I think you should learn a trade, but that's not going to necessarily solve your proclivity towards committing a crime and hurting somebody else. I think the root cause is much deeper than the fact that you can't afford something. I think there's something altogether different there. All right, so let's bring up another comment here. Thank you, Kara, for that. Dustin Harris, what's up, buddy? Dustin Harris is back. Film credits are a scam as well, LOL. Just like you said, the film credit will be taken by the production company. They'll pocket the money, They'll give out low-paid jobs or even no-paid jobs. Yeah, you want an opportunity to work in the film industry, you're going to work for free, buddy. That's true. There's that, there's that pay your, what do you work your way to the top by working for free. It's a horrible industry to be in. If it is not your passion, there is no way we should subsidize the film industry. Dustin, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'll add to that, the vast majority of the films that are being produced are really, I think, antithetical to American values anyway. Maybe that's why this Michigan legislature wants to do this, because they love the content that's being put out by these film companies. So, yeah, thanks for that. Dustin, always good to hear from you, buddy. Let's bring up one more, and I'm going to take a few more comments here. I want to share a tweet from somebody I know that kind of highlights this reckless spending. Jim Chikowski is back. Hey, Jim. The mandated state park pass money most likely would not benefit the park system, but used for any other non-productive programs. That's exactly right, Jim. That's true. The reason why they're doing this is because they want to raise revenue in order to do some of these, social programs. They want to give people free stuff. It's not free, of course. Again, this will be another example of, hey, if we make everybody pay $11 a year for a park they're never going to use, you multiply that by 10 million. Boy, that's a lot of money. 11 bucks by 10 million or whatever it comes out to. Think about what they're doing here. $11 might not seem like and that's the fee, by the way. I think it still is the fee unless they raise that as well. If you want a state park pass that they put on your license plate every year when you renew your registration. Well, this time you have to opt out of it, or you're going to get that 11 bucks tacked onto it, and they get to reap millions of dollars to pass out to other people, whether it's, buying someone a house or an apartment or whatever. It's not going to you. It's not going to what government was intended to spend its money on, which is basic stuff, infrastructure, fighting crime, fighting fires, safety, and basic needs, infrastructure, roads, bridges, that kind of stuff. They're not supposed to give people a universal basic income. You're not supposed to give illegal immigrants free housing. You're not supposed to even provide free, child care for families who want to go out and get a job. That's not the role of government. It really isn't. And that sounds harsh. Believe me, I believe in child care. But the fact that the government thinks they're going to be your nanny, it's wrong. And it's not what they're intended to be. But that's what they would like to be. Again, the nanny state in control of your life. Hey, I want to bring this up because this was Megan Reckling. She is she's run for office, and I think a few different times, and she works with various members of the legislature, and she's basically involved in politics. And I think she's in Livingston County. She used to be the chair of the Livingston County GOP. But she put some thoughts on X. I think this was yesterday when I saw this. And she was talking about the ridiculous spending that this governor, Gretchen Whitmer, and the Democratic legislature have just done over the past year. In 2024 alone, this year, the Michigan legislature had this is what she wrote, and I'm going to read it to you. The Michigan legislature enjoyed an unprecedented $9.2 billion budget surplus. $9.2 billion budget surplus. Instead of Governor Whitmer and the Michigan Democrats budgeting responsibly, they blew through the entire surplus in months. In months. They're like Kamala Harris on a spending spree when she got, $2.5 billion that she had access to suddenly because she was running for president and her campaign had $2.5 billion. Hey, let's spend it. Let's bring in Oprah in for $1 million. Let's bring in, whatever. $2.5 billion in just a few months. This is how Democrats think. Your money doesn't matter to them. It's theirs. They can do with it what they want. So now, this is Megan Reckling continuing here. Now they are proposing to raise the gas tax by 19 cents a gallon. Did you know that? That's another thing they're proposing here. Raise the gas tax by 19 cents a gallon. Increase our vehicle registration fees by $100. Create toll roads on Michigan interstates. You hear that? Toll roads on Michigan interstates so we can be just like Illinois and just add fee upon fee. So if you want to take a vacation up north to your cabin, well, it's going to cost you now. You're going to probably be stopped every few miles to pay another fee to just do what you thought your registration and your other taxes paid for, to drive on the roads in the state. Oh no, toll roads now on Michigan interstates and charge drivers toll fees. Megan Reckling continues here. Increase the cost or the price of watercraft legislation fees by 30% from 2025 to 2027, and then another 15% from 2028 to 2030. Increase hunting and fishing licenses by 50%. Create a new permit fee to use state-owned shooting ranges. Double the amount of the Travel and Convention Bureau can assess on hotel rooms, and add a fee to all water meters throughout the state. This is what they want to do. They want to charge you to death. They want to nickel and dime you, tell you, well, you can't even afford, again, your eggs or your rotisserie chicken over at Meijer or at Kroger any longer. I would recommend going to Costco because the rotisserie chickens are bigger. They're fluffier, and they're like $4.99. It's a pretty good deal. But watch out for the piano they want to sell you in there for a couple $1,000. That's where they get you. Okay, let's get some headlines here. I'll get to more of your comments as well. So the United Healthcare death. Okay, so the guy's been caught. He's been charged. 26-year-old Luigi Mangione. He has been charged with second-degree murder in the shooting death of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Mangione's the guy, prosecutors say, gunned down Thompson on the Manhattan sidewalk, which you're seeing right there, on December the 4th, now facing a slew of charges, including weapon possession and forgery. Those are court records. Those were the initial charges late Monday night. Since then, he's now been charged with, I think it's second-degree murder. I don't know why it's second degree. It shouldn't be first degree. So anyway, the charges are forthcoming. They're coming down for this guy. That's Thompson right there, 50-year-old man. You know, he was shot execution style outside the Hilton Hotel moments before that shareholder conference at which he was set to speak. And the calculated nature of that attack, combined with Mangione's possession of writings that were very critical of the healthcare industry. A lot of questions now about a possible motive, which was seemingly rooted in resentment toward corporate America. Thank you, Democrats, for saying corporate America is evil. Yeah, and authorities also recovered a ghost gun. They say that was believed to be the murder weapon, which you saw him pointing in that video. The arrest was very interesting how this went down. Mangione, it came after this dramatic, of course, nationwide manhunt. It ended in Pennsylvania at this McDonald's in Altoona, Pennsylvania. And a rookie police officer, a cop, he took Mangione, he got a hold of him, apprehended him, and it was after he got a tip from some locals there who recognized Mangione from a wanted poster. And then he had like a fake ID. The cops came up to him and said, he had a mask on, take down your mask. He did, and they recognized him right away. Let's see your ID. It was a fake ID. They knew it was, and he was like shaking apparently. He was visibly nervous as they approached him. So they knew it was the guy. They took him into custody. And now the suspect's family has been speaking out, including a Maryland state delegate, Nino Mangione, involved in politics here. I don't know what party he's from, I can guess, but he said that they were shocked and requested prayers about this. I'm sure they are. I feel bad for the family. Anytime this happens and one of your own goes astray like this, it's horrific, I'm sure, to go through. But he was apparently a promising engineer at one time, a valedictorian, very smart guy, but descending now into chaos and violence. A lot of classmates of his and, of course, colleagues and now families stunned about what he ended up doing right there you see on the video. All right, let's talk about what's happening in Syria. The Biden administration is claiming victory in Syria following the sudden collapse of Bashar Assad's brutal regime. And when I say Biden is claiming victory, he says he's to credit for the fall of Assad and Damascus. And a lot of fierce debate now as a result of this because, you know, for years, Biden's team, they have maintained this kind of contradictory Syrian policy. They were funding Assad's backers, like Iran, and they were limiting Israel's ability to dismantle the regional terror network there. They were actually working actively against Israel and seemingly helping out Syria all these years. And yet when Assad fled into exile in Moscow last week, President Biden declared that it's proof of his leadership, of U.S. leadership, calling it a shift in the balance of power in the Middle East. Now, it is a major shift. There has been one ongoing, the balance of power in the Middle East. But the critics here of Joe Biden say, listen, the reality of all of this tells a completely different story. John Hanna is this guy. He's a former national security advisor, and he called Biden's, credit seeking for this. He said unseemly is the way he put it, pointing out that the administration has been very reluctant to fully support Israel's decisive military efforts against the Iranian proxies, including Syria. There's an Iran expert that spoke out against this, and he said that Biden's risk-averse Middle East approach is what led to so much of the chaos in the Middle East and the rise in terrorist attacks in the Middle East. And he was contrasting it with actually Israel's bold actions. Then Israel was to really credit, despite Biden's opposition to what Benjamin Netanyahu has wanted to do, that Israel is to credit for the fall here. A lot of deep misjudgments of Bashar al-Assad and this radical Islamist movements that have been in his country, and they've haunted both. When you look back to Barack Obama and the Joe Biden administrations, they were courting Assad before his atrocities. Pulling punches. They were countering Iran's influence. Their policies emboldening Assad's brutal regime. Remember Nancy Pelosi back in 2007? She met with Assad. Tried to do this kind of diplomatic approach. It would only emboldened them, it seemed, because since that meeting and throughout the Obama years, Assad just gained power, and then Trump comes in, and what does he do? He goes into Syria. He does some incredibly bold strikes in weakening Syria and Iran and the backing of Syria. And then Biden comes back into office. You see everything blowing up. This was good, what happened, because it's good in a sense, but now we got this power vacuum there where you have very much still anti-Israeli and anti-American terrorist organizations now seeking to gain control of Syria. So, boy, it is going to be a mess there, I think, for a long time. It's good that Assad is gone, but listen, do you remember the red line? Barack Obama drew a red line with Assad, and he said, if you ever use chemical weapons, that's a red line that you cannot cross, and if you do, there will be severe consequences. Well, Assad crossed the red line, Obama's red line, without any consequence, right? It left the region totally destabilized. It would be nice to call them missteps, but there were no consequences, and al-Assad was free to control and commit all these atrocities in his own country. So it was the Israeli attempts. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he credits, rightfully so, Israel's strikes, not Biden's policies, for Assad's downfall. And he acknowledged there's a lot of challenges ahead. This isn't over. This is maybe just the beginning now. But the concerns now over the possible ISIS resurgence, that's a big, big concern here. It looms large now. And the Kurdish forces, struggling to hold their ground, what's going to happen there? So Senator Lindsey Graham, he chimed in on this, and he warned that, Biden's past failures in Afghanistan and Syria have left America very vulnerable right now. And who knows, there may be many of these, dangerous Syrian, Iranian proxies, really, that may be even in our country right now. So there's deep regional instability that is risking right now the interest of the United States. But okay, if Biden wants to claim that he was the reason for all this, go ahead. You have a right. It's a free country, buddy. All right, Christopher Wray, I want to talk about the FBI. He's preparing to step down as the FBI director, and it's a seismic political shift that we're going to see there. And the FBI director, Christopher Wray, acknowledging that shift, is reportedly planning to resign on or before Inauguration Day. And according to sources inside the Bureau, Christopher Wray's decision comes as President-elect Donald Trump is obviously boldly signaling these sweeping changes at the FBI, including replacing Christopher Wray with Kash Patel. We've been reporting on that, and he's a longtime Trump ally, Kash Patel is, and he's known for his commitment to reforming many aspects of the government, but in this case would be the FBI and even the Department of Justice, which oversees the FBI. So clearly, Donald Trump is not happy with Christopher Wray, as he told NBC News over the weekend.
Are you going to fire the current FBI director, Christopher Wray, who you appointed?
Well, I can't say I'm thrilled with him. He invaded my home. I'm suing the country over it. He invaded Mar-a-Lago. I'm very unhappy with the things he's done. And crime is at an all-time high. Migrants are pouring into the country that are from prisons and from mental institutions, as we've discussed. I can't say I'm thrilled. I don't want to be Joe Biden and give you an answer and then do the exact opposite.
We're going to talk about
So
that,
I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to say is I certainly cannot be happy with him.
Yeah, he simply cannot be happy with them, and I haven't been either. There are a lot of seemingly politically biased investigations under his watch. There's no question about it. And these things need to stop. It's an abuse of power. Chuck Grassley, he had a pretty sharp critique as well, including that controversial raid on Donald Trump's home, Mar-a-Lago, the estate there. And they were armed agents. I had a guy, he's an attorney. He used to call our program a lot, and he would say, there was not one single armed agent out in front of Mar-a-Lago the day of the raid. Yeah, there were. They had actually not just, pistols, but they had, full-on what some might call assault weapons. They were armed agents searching even, the First Lady's clothing drawers. So as a husband, I'd be pretty upset, too, if I knew they were going. What's the purpose? You had no right to go in there. And you certainly didn't do the same thing to Joe Biden when he was accused of the exact same thing. This was the classified documents raid. And they did not do that to Joe Biden, who had just as many, if not more, classified material in multiple locations, including in his homes and his offices. They weren't going through his wife's drawers that I'm aware of. So anyway, good. I hope Christopher Wray does step down. And if not, I'm sure he'll be fired, because Kash Patel is on his way, it seems. All right, we have time for another comment here. Let's bring it up. And I want to thank you for your comments today and your questions. Let's bring up Arlene Pearson. Hi, Arlene. Good to see you. What can be done to oppose these fiscally irresponsible and unfair bills being pushed by the Democrats? I've been told by my state representatives that phone calls make a difference. They do make a difference. I've been told the same thing. And it's not just one or two. It has to really be, Arlene, an onslaught of people calling them up saying, you cannot do this. You will never and get people around you to a coalition of individuals who are putting out a bold statement saying you will not come back to office. We are paying attention to what you're doing this week, and it's unfair because the voting public does not want any of these bills. Again, I think it's 181 bills this week they're trying to ram through before the Republicans control the House in Michigan. And they don't want that. And it's already, they've done so much damage to the state, to individual liberties, which they say they care about these things, but they don't. They want to tell you how you should talk and how you should live. And some of these bills deal with speech and what you're allowed to say and what you're not allowed to say, based on someone's feelings might get hurt. And if that's the case, that could be considered a hate crime, and that could lead to further consequences, maybe fine, maybe monetary, or maybe criminal, depending on how the person feels about what you said to him or her. That's not a reason to censor anybody. We've got a good friend of mine. He's been on the program. Brooks Gibbs says we need to build in resilience again in our kids, because when they become adults, if we don't build in resilience, they're going to be perpetual babies the rest of their life, always being offended and hurt by what somebody says to or about them. When I was a kid, I was easily offended, and I really cared deeply about what people thought of me. No longer. I mean, I want the best for them, but I don't often, maybe sometimes, but I don't often find myself in the fetal position sucking my thumb. I never do that. That was infancy, is my point. And if you find yourself doing that, maybe it's time, maybe something is wrong with you specifically, and it's time to address that issue that you are struggling with about how easily you become offended. Anyway, that's a long answer to Arlene's question. What can be done? Call them up And if really the only thing you can do is if you don't like what they're doing, you got to vote them out and get somebody else who you trust to take that person's stead in office. All right, one more, then we'll have to say so long. Harris Akelian, hey, you're back. Hey, Tom, the Dems' legislative crazy wish list is a witch's brew of lunacy. Please keep up your good work, letting the public know what's happening behind the scenes. Regards, Harry Sakilin. Harry, always appreciate your comments, and thanks for your kind words. I appreciate it very much. Yeah, it is, and I love the way you phrase that. A witch's brew of lunacy. I think you added crazy in there as well. So yeah, well said. In my opinion, very truthful as well. All right, thanks for watching this episode of Tom Jordan Live. Again, we're on X, YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, and Apple Podcast. We will be back here tomorrow morning, streaming live, 9 a.m. Eastern. TomJordanLive.com as well. You can find us there. God bless you. We'll see you back here tomorrow.